We're going to talk about shading systems in this video, specifically like louvers. Now there are a couple ways we could go about creating these, and each has their advantage and disadvantage. And the way that you go about it is just going to be dependent on how you've set up your shading system. So the first method is to take your curtain grid system and use those mullions, just adjusting the mullion types so that they become louvers. The second method is to create a curtain system itself with an empty panel and adjust that rhythm and that sort of the grid layout, and make the louvers be the mullions be the louvers, and then that's sort of separated from your curtain wall as a new curtain wall. And the last method is to model and place these elements as structural framing extrusions. So I'm going to go through each of them. So the first method is to use an existing curtain wall and a curtain grid. So here I can select this system, and you can see that it's based on all of these rules. Well, what would happen if I just wanted to change these into louvers? I would probably go and select, I would tab over so I can get just one of these. And I don't know why that's changing color, but anyways. Tab over to select one of these mullions, and I can right click on this mullion, and you can see that there's a select mullion option. I'm just going to select all of them on the vertical grid. So this will give me all of my options. You could do this for horizontal as well. Just keep in mind this is the west wall, so I want to have some vertical shading here. And here you can see I can change this type, and it will disassociate actually from the curtain grid system. I'm going to edit this type, duplicate it, and we'll call it shading 1. And now what we could do is we could basically manipulate some of these parameters that they're essentially louvers. So here I'm going to change the thickness to, let's change it to 4 feet, just exaggerate this a little bit. And the rest of it I'm going to keep the same. So if I hit OK here, you can see that the thickness has changed, so these things are going, they're 4 feet total, but they're going 2 feet in, 2 feet out. You could keep that. You could keep the sort of center line at the middle of the grid line, but we can also change this offset parameter to be 2 feet. And if we do that, you can see that they all adjust to be on the outside, so it's half the distance of your the thickness of the louver. So that is one option. You can do this for single grid lines, so we can do select mullions on grid line, and we can change this. Well, we have to unpin it first. So if you had a problem with that, first go around, just make sure that these are unpinned, and then we can change it to the shading system, right? And it will follow the same parameters. But now it's not all of the horizontal ones. So maybe you just want to select the border condition. You could actually edit the type for this this type of facade. You can duplicate it, but you can change your border type to be the louvers. Sorry, shading 1. So that's the one we're using here. So here you can see some funky stuff is happening. So that might lead to the second method, which will just undo all this stuff here. And that is to take your architectural wall, your curtain wall, edit the type, duplicate it, and we can call this shading system. The thing we have to change though is we have to make sure our curtain panel is set to system panel, empty system panel. And then it won't fill with anything. And here we can change all of these rules, etc. We can also change all of these mullions. So here I'm going to change this to shading. And now I'm going to go into a ground floor plan and just create this as its own system. Whoops, that's the wrong side. So let's do it here. And this would go out to there. So now if we go to 3D, you can see that this is its own system that I can adjust all of the elements to. So here we'll change the top to the roof. And it's not populating with anything, right? It's not populating with any sort of element. The advantage to this is that you can have something that's separated from your curtain grid. It can follow the exact same grid, but then you can, do things like this. You can offset it. You can have it run at, different offsets from your curtain system that exists there, and you can get some interesting sort of architectural features. You can also move this around, so you can move it off of your facade. A little bit. I mean, keep it close because it has to have, stand up. But you can do the same thing as I just went through with the curtain, the existing curtain grid. We can select the mullions on the grid line, unpin them, and change them to this shading system. And then if you really want, like an overhang here, you can delete some of these too. There's a whole host of paths that you can start to take to sort of start to sculpt your facade with these separate shading elements. So the last one I'm going to show here is a model in place element. So let's say I want a horizontal shading element right here. Now I could add a grid line on this facade, and then I could change it to the horizontal louver. Or I could just model this in place. The way I would go about that is by making an extrusion. So we're going to go to Architecture, Component, Model in Place, and I recommend just using a structural framing for this, which will turn on and off in our structural views. So here we can go to Structural Framing. And the reason why we do structural framing, normally we would do this as a generic model, but I think you've imported your Rhino models as generic models, so I just want to make sure that this shows up for you. And here it's asking us to start drawing. Now we're in a 3D mode, and I'm just going to start as an extrusion here, and we can set the work plane, and I can just pick a plane here, and I'm going to pick the edge of this mullion as my work plane. And now I can draw a rectangle here. I can move this up, and just like in the mechanical videos, you can actually create section views and elevation views that look at this. If we go to our west elevation, for instance, you can start to see what we're modeling a little bit more clearly. And you can, add dimensions to this, but yeah. So the way I did this was I just used create extrusion. So we'll hit check here, and we have parameters. We have an extrusion end and an extrusion start, or I can simply drag these into place. So this is a fairly simple way of modeling like a horizontal overhang, right? And you can copy this up. You can change its material. You can then modify it afterwards by, it doesn't even have to be that regular of an element. It's probably better like this. Let's trim extend. And you can get, some cooler shapes out of it. And these can get really, really complicated. You can array these. So let's go to a south facade here. You can take this element, and you can array it from here to here. And let's say I want 10 of them. And you can create some architectural elements like that. Just keep in mind, I'm still modeling in this structural framing group. So it won't populate until I hit this check. And now if I hit this check, you can see that all of them select because I arrayed it inside of the modeling. So I'm going to undo this. I'm going to hit check, and then I'm going to show you that you can go to a south elevation and then array it, or then copy it. You get 10, and now you can see that these won't, all select at the same time. So you can now modify these afterwards. So just pay attention to when you're arraying it, whether that's in the extrusion or outside the extrusion. So the same process as a horizontal louver was just modeled here. You can do that as a vertical louver, and it's sort of totally separate from any system, and you can just model it that way. You can copy these, you can modify them with sort of more architectural implications. So those are the three methods. The first is to actually use your existing mullions, your existing curtain walls, and change those grids. Select the mullions on the grids. So select mullions across grid line, and you can change just those. Make sure you unpin it, and then you can change it to what you need. And just keep in mind that if this changes 90 degrees, you might have to make multiple louver families. The second method is to just create a curtain wall that's on its own, and it can follow the same path as the curtain wall behind it, but it has a little bit more autonomy. You can sort of move this thing around. You can have a grid that's totally different than your facade. And then the third way is to model these extrusions in place. You can also model as a blend if you really want to get into the nitty-gritty of it, where you can have one profile is different than the end profile, so it has sort of a more organic form. So just follow the method that's best for your building, and this might take a little bit of time, but if you pay attention to it, if you pay attention to where you're placing these things, how you're placing these things, then this becomes actually a really fun process, because your building is starting to look very much like a building.